It's the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast, where we talk about all things consensual non-monogamy, polyamory, open relationships, swinging, and how you can have secure and sexy relationships, no matter how you do them. Now here's your hosts, Tara and Andre. Hey, Andre.
Hi, Tara.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. And welcome everybody to the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast with Tara and Andre. For those of you who don't know us, a little bit of an introduction. I am Tara Lynn Franco. I am a relationship and awesomeness coach.
And I'm Andre Turcotte. I am a sex-positive psychotherapist.
And together, we are the co-creators of this podcast. And we have an awesome online community, Let's Talk Polyamory. So same name on Facebook. It's a private group. We invite you to join. And we are the co-creators of some courses and programs, including our very popular Poly Newbies digital course. And our passion is to help you create and maintain healthy and secure non-monogamous relationships and navigate through some of the rough bits that come up from time to time. And so this episode is all about non-monogamy and your mental health.
It sure is. So why this topic now? Well, at the time of this recording and release of this podcast, it is Mental Health Week in Canada. And so it is obviously a timely topic to discuss, but also it is the attempt to try to normalize and destigmatize not only ethical non-monogamy, but also mental health issues, right? We want to take it out of the shadows, any form of embarrassment, any reluctance to talk about it. We bring it forward. We want to talk about it. We want to say everything about it. So that's why we're doing this today.
Yeah, and it's part of what we do in our everyday lives too. And so it's about time we did this topic, I think. You may have heard this out there, and it's true. Transitioning to from monogamy to non-monogamy can intensify your emotional experiences and sometimes open up things that maybe were sitting there in the sidelines, like old wounds, unspoken fears, attachment issues, unmet needs, etc. And it can bring those things to the surface, but it's important to note that it doesn't cause mental health issues. It just may bring these to the surface.
Yeah, it may even create or activate feelings of issues that you may not have been aware of, or things that have been previously considered non-issues before. But Tara, as we say that, it makes me think about not just C&M or E&M relationships, but any kind of relationships, right? How often do we hear somebody say, "Oh my God, he's driving me crazy"? Like, you might not have felt that way outside by yourself, but suddenly you're in a relationship and you have your own things that you bring to the table. But then couple that with being in a couple or several couples or several people, it could really just be the miracle grow on your own issues. But we're going to talk about a little bit about those things.
I like that. The miracle grow of things that you probably don't want to grow and you'd rather stay stagnant in the ground. But I mean, it's also an opportunity too, right? Like one of my coaches uses the term AGO, another growth opportunity. And certainly for me, becoming non-monogamous, exploring that as a relationship style has definitely allowed me to grow in many ways and deal with some of those issues that were kind of on the back burner. But yeah, just wanted to call it out that it doesn't cause this. And I say that because I don't know about you, Andre, but I've had several people that I've talked to that opened up a relationship and, they had some difficulty, as you do with a lot of relationships. They don't have to be non-monogamous. And then as soon as they spoke to somebody about it, they're like, well, why are you doing this? Like, why not just be monogamous? All your problems will be solved, which we know is not the case.
Yeah, because if that were the case, you could just check into one of those monogamous relationships and everything would be copacetic and you'd never have any issues. So it's really not true, right? There's no correlation to say that being in one or the other is going to create or protect you from.
Absolutely. So in this episode, we're going to talk about mental health and the pressure to be enlightened. So for everything to be okay, common emotional challenges people have in navigating consensual non-monogamy. We'll give you some ideas and thoughts on how to work through these mental health issues on your own and with support. And speaking of support, when and how to seek support and what type you might need. including how we can help. And we want to make sure we leave you with something today. So we have a special free resource for you that we've developed, and it's called the Non-Monogamy and Your Mental Health. It's a reflection worksheet and planning guide. So we'll make sure we drop that in the show notes, as well as anything else we talk about, including how to get in touch with us. And along the way, as usual, we'll share some personal stories about us and, our journey and things that have come up for us.
Exciting.
Awesome. So while you're listening to this podcast, we want you to think about a couple of key questions, have them in the back of your mind as an intention today. One of them is, how are you really doing this mental health week or whenever you're listening to this? So wanting you to be really honest with yourself about how you're feeling right now. And the second question is, are there things that you're ignoring that might be good to get support on before they become worse?
Yeah, I think those are great questions to ask, great intentions while listening to this, because how often, and myself included, do we put up these fronts where we say, well, I have to be strong, or I have to appear a certain way. And maybe it's not society telling us this, it is these self-imposed ideas, these ways of being. And what does it mean if I am not this way? So to talk about these things might then make it sort of more viable, more easy to say, well, you know what, actually, and sometimes I'm not doing so well, and that's okay too. I think what's really important is that you acknowledge it, and then you go to the next step of like, well, what can I do about it then? I don't have to simply suffer in silence. I don't have to feel so isolated. I can reach out and get help, because there is help.
Yeah, and I think that segues really well into the first topic of this podcast. You may be having these feelings, right? And I've certainly felt this way. And then you look around, and so if you're in online communities and stuff like that, you'll see people posting pictures and sharing things and saying how awesome things are. And I think sometimes it feels like you're the only one that's like not doing it right or having issues and that sort of thing. And one of the myths that people have to come face to face with is that being polyamorous equals being emotionally invincible. Like you have to be perfect all the time, or you really shouldn't be doing non-monogamy. And that's just not true.
Yeah, that makes me think right away of that old compare and despair, right? Mm-hmm. So what we're going to put on social media is going to be the beautiful, polished thing of our vacations, the wonderful times we're having. Rarely would we ever see anything that is counter to that, the real part of how we might feel when the lights are off, when we are alone and naked in the dark and just left with our own feelings. It's just not what we put forward. We want to be the shining best examples of ourselves, and we put that forward. But it doesn't really then necessarily give enough space to what's on the other side of it.
Yeah, and there's really no perfect way, or there's no perfect situation. You don't always have to feel secure. You don't always have to feel total compersion. And we've talked about that before in some of our episodes. We talked about jealousy and that sort of thing. Is like some people think that the only way to do this is to never be jealous, or to start off as not a jealous person. And I don't think that either isn't realistic, and it's also not a requirement. You can work towards having neutral feelings. I mean, compersion's awesome. I love having compersion, and most of the times I do, but sometimes I don't. And I don't think that's a reason not to go on this journey if it's something that you're wanting to do. It's just a matter of working through things. Struggle doesn't make you bad at polyamory. It just makes you human. Like, we struggle in all of our relationships. None of them are perfect.
Yeah, I like that very much. We needn't be perfect. We just have to be human. Show up and be who you are.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's talk a bit about some of the common emotional challenges that people are faced with when they decide to explore consensual non-monogamy.
People often say that they feel overwhelmed by managing multiple connections and scheduling different needs, right? So not only are you faced with your own, but now you have to have the consideration of another individual, which is true of monogamy as well. But add to that the variables of how many other people are you going to be considering, and that you should be considering them. So you are going to have all of these different factors multiplying and making it something of consideration.
Yeah, and I think one of the most common things I hear from people, one of the issues that they face is time management. Like, how do I balance all these things? And that's why some people end up getting to a situation where they consider themselves as polysaturated. So they have too many partners. And the number of partners can differ between different people. Like, someone may be polysaturated with 2 partners. You know what I mean? It depends on what those relationships are like, what the proximity is, what the expectations are. And I think you touched on that a bit. When you're managing multiple connections, you're managing multiple needs, and people may have different levels of need. And so that's something else that you have to deal with emotionally by dividing your time, that you may de facto not be meeting someone else's emotional needs. So that's obviously something that needs to be talked about at the
Yeah.
beginning of a relationship and throughout.
Absolutely. And on the other side of that, while we might try to show up for these other people and their needs, the people that we're with may not necessarily be able to meet our needs, right? Because they are having their own things going on as well. Another common emotional challenge that is brought up is the idea of shame or anxiety from social judgment, from especially those at home, friends, families, people around us. I know that when we came out to our family, it was not necessarily received in the optimal way. And there was some judgment, some shame that was attached to that. It was difficult.
Yeah. And often some of the shame is also self-imposed, right? Like if you grew up a certain way, you may feel shameful about wanting something different in your life. Like, who am I to want multiple loves? Like, that's wrong. You know what I mean? And it's something that people have to get over, this monogamous mindset. Or if you've had any sort of religious background, sometimes that can play into it as well. Like, how is this even possible?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned it as being multiple loves and not just multiple sex partners, because why would we ever want to limit the amount of love that we are receiving? That seems perverse.
Yeah, and I think people want to have multiple people in our lives generally, and that not one person cannot suit all of our needs. Hence, we wouldn't have friends and family members that we see. Yet, it's the thing that people will come up with and that will struggle with. I just spoke to someone this week, and they said their partner is like, "Aren't I enough for you? Why can't I be enough for you?" And they have some certain needs that are not being met. That person is not willing to work on those things and meet those needs, but does not also want them to explore non-monogamy as a possibility of meeting their needs.
You know, Tara, it makes me think of a little story that I just saw about this beautiful little duck, and it was coupled, it was partnered with somebody, but then its partner died, and it remained in mourning for a long time because it was missing that, but it was lonely also. And the people who witnessed that went and found another duck who was widowed, and they coupled the two of them, and they were
Aw.
able to enjoy each other's lives together. So it's a beautiful model that we have the ability to love more than one, and we should have more than one love, because I might want to be there for you for the rest of my life, but when my life ends, will you be lonely and alone? I would want you to have other loves. We should invite other loves. From just a practical standpoint, we may not terminate at the same time. So
Mhm.
shouldn't we have a network of loving people in our lives that are able to be there for each other?
Yeah, and throughout our lives. And that's actually one of the ideas we suggest in order to support feeling good in non-monogamy. So some of the other things that can come up for people related to mental health are mental health differences between partners. So sometimes people are already struggling with some sort of mental health issue, and that can come into play and can sometimes exaggerate issues in the relationship or make things a little bit more difficult. Another big one, which you find, and often people don't really realize this until they decide to be non-monogamous or open up a relationship, is attachment triggers or attachment differences. Like, honestly, I did not know anything about attachment styles before we started this journey ourselves and started learning about it and educating ourselves on attachment styles. So say, for example, you're married or you're in an exclusive monogamous long-term relationship. Part of the security in that might be the structure of the relationship, the fact that there is only one person, there's a limited number of factors that are influencing it. And then when you open a relationship, then all of a sudden there's other people involved, other needs, other emotions, and that sort of thing. And you can't rely on that structure as the security. So if you had any previous insecure attachment, anxiety, avoidant, disorganized attachment, then, those may come to the surface, and you'll need to spend some time and work on how you create what you said at the beginning, that secure base and safe haven with your partners.
Yeah, absolutely. It is wonderful to feel secure enough to avail ourselves, to be that secure base, to be that safe haven for our partner or partners, as they may be for us as well. But you're absolutely right. Maybe we didn't know so much about this when we first came out, but by talking about this, by exploring it, by being curious, we are able to really look at that and invite ourselves to participate more in those ways of being. And it does raise the quality of our life, which does affect the quality of our mental well-being.
Exactly. And we talked a bit about this at the beginning, but time scarcity and some burnout. So people go like full on at the beginning and they're doing lots of dates, they're meeting lots of people, and then all of a sudden you're running out of time, but you also may be burning out. And I recently spoke to someone about this very issue. They are involved in mostly swinging lifestyle events and had gotten to the point where every week they were meeting multiple people and they just were like, it's just too much to do that and balance life and work and that sort of thing. That can come an issue as well, burnout.
Yeah, and that kind of speaks to the next idea, the difference in readiness to open an existing relationship and the different desire which we will incorporate or allow for different relationships with different people, the speed in which we will make that transition.
Yeah, because people start from various different points, right? I think part of what was good for us and why we were fortunate is that we came to this together and we began this journey together. So we learned and grew as we went, made lots of mistakes. We actually did a podcast on that topic, but we kind of did it together. So the speed was sort of defined by both of us. But sometimes, and I just spoke to someone the other day about this, like maybe I had this idea that I want to be on this journey and I've been thinking about it for a while. And then I only tell my partner, who maybe I've been with for a long time, today, and they haven't gone on that journey. So they're in shock, they're not ready, they weren't anticipating it. And so then you end up in this situation where one person feels ready to act, and then the other person is like feeling like, oh my God, this is so scary, I'm not ready.
Yeah, it can be very threatening for many people, right? In that initial conversation or further into it.
Yeah. And even if you do start at the same time, people just want to go at a different speed to get comfortable with things. And I think, do you agree with this, Andre, that you would go at the speed of the slowest person?
Yeah, without a doubt. We can't bring somebody reluctantly into it. It will not create a positive feeling, a feeling of security. And that's really what we want. It's got to feel safe and consensual. We don't want to coerce somebody into it. We don't want to push their limits at it. It won't be a positive experience for them. So yes, absolutely. We default to how did you phrase it? It was well said.
To the speed of the slowest person.
Okay, we'll call it that then.
I think there's a better way of saying it.
Maybe our listeners will chime in with an offering. I think we do have a term for it, but it's evading me at the moment.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I think people don't anticipate, but that can cause some struggles in terms of heightened emotions, is that now you're dealing with multiple people and their emotions and their relationships. So now if I went and dated someone else and, I think that my relationship is me and them, but if they have another partner, then that relationship also can have an impact on ours and how they feel about it. If I had $1 for every time someone said that they're having trouble with their metamor, so the partner of their partner, maybe not being comfortable with things. Someone recently told me that the person that they're with, who they love and they are enjoying themselves with it, their partner doesn't want them to be polyamorous. So that can create a very difficult and emotional situation for people.
How could it not?
How could it not? So you're dealing with multiple people, like we said at the beginning, and it doesn't matter what their relationship is to you. It may have an impact on your emotions and your mental health. And so that's why we have some suggestions. These are very simple suggestions, but a few things that you can do to help boost your mental health and start to address these kinds of issues. Other than the obvious things that we've said, like slow down, talk about it, and all that stuff. So.
And also to add to that, the idea of consideration. How might the other person feel? So I have my agenda, my desires to go one way, but am I also open to considering how they might be feeling as well? That's a big part. Yeah. But in these mental health habits for non-monogamous folks, as you call them, personal boundaries as an emotional self-care. If we don't know what our personal boundaries are, how are we going to be able to share them? So we become first informed about them. And we did a podcast on that called Pardon Me, But You're Stepping on My Boundaries, which helps to inform us in what they might be and then how to announce them, or also, and also very importantly, how to recognize other people's boundaries and respect them.
Yeah, part of part of all of this is, yeah, understanding your own, communicating them, and then also sometimes reminding people when maybe they have stepped on our boundaries. And so that's all part of that podcast we did. And we even included a worksheet related to that, so you could start to work on your boundaries. That was a really good one.
Yeah, it's part of self-care, right? Because
Mhm.
I was working with somebody and they said that they were a little bit reluctant to make these boundaries, to announce them, because they felt as though, well, they were wanting to not offend, or they wanted to please the other person, but it was coming at the cost of their own well-being. So we're not wanting to be selfish, but we wanted to be self-preserving.
Yeah, and I think generally people do want to respect our boundaries. Like, I would never want to do something that crossed someone's boundaries without knowing it. I had a client once who had some sexual assault trauma in her past, and there was certain things that made her uncomfortable. And they were sort of everyday things that most people would not notice. So someone could easily do that to someone without even knowing that it was something. It was a certain way of touching, non-sexual touching, but touching that triggered those feelings. And so we had talked about, and I think we probably talked about this in the boundaries one as well. She's like, how can I find a sexy way to share my boundaries? And so part of it was believing, the first part is having a belief that people do want to respect your boundaries and they do want to know about it. And their experience once they shared those was obviously positive. Nobody ever wants to trigger emotions in somebody that would be hurtful, right? So part of it is mindset too. Yeah, boundaries. Lots to say about boundaries. So another part of boundaries, which may be getting enough rest and alone time. So that actually may be a personal boundary, is that you need a certain amount of rest time and alone time away from partners. So being on your own and having that regeneration so you don't feel burnt out or you don't feel emotionally overcharged.
Tara, that's interesting too, because I was speaking to someone yesterday, and they are becoming more and more aware of to what extent they will couple with partners for not only the gratification, but the validation, how it makes them feel a certain way, and it makes them feel connected or desired. And yet asking them to spend time alone is a little bit scary for them at the moment. So they are going to learn how to grow that and appreciate being by themselves. There is value in that as well.
Yeah, and not only does that help with your mental health, but it helps you get used to things. If you are nesting with a partner, or if you see someone regularly and they're with somebody else, it's like, you almost have to learn how to do things on your own and actually relish that time. I mean, I miss you when we're apart, but I also enjoy doing certain things on my own as well. And so I've come to look forward to those times as much as I can, and use them as opportunities to do things maybe that we wouldn't do normally together.
Yeah, I like the idea of our choosing to come together rather than feeling as though we have to be together. There's a difference between being dependent upon it and being independent and electing to be.
So another strategy to support your relationships and your mental health is to have regular relationship check-ins. So having a place where you can speak about topics related to your relationship, things that you're happy with, unhappy with, things that you might want to change, etc. And the method we teach is our radar, which is based multi-amory, the podcast, they have the radar method, but we've added an extra one in. So it's an acronym of how you do the review. So it's review, create an agenda, affirm and connect. That's our addition. Discuss, action plan, and reconnect. And we have talked about that in one of our episodes. We talked about relationship reviews and check-ins. And then finally, not finally, one more is being open with partners when you're struggling. So not hiding it, like obviously using the check-ins to air maybe larger grievances, but not holding back, not keeping things to yourself and allowing them to build resentments and all that stuff, and continuous sharing. And this is like a factual sharing, or this is how I'm feeling, and letting them know what you might or might not want them to do as a result. And it's not all about blaming, it's about sharing. And, you can use our 2-minute communication method or the non-violent communication method to do this, to share your feelings.
So as far as opening up with partners, when somebody says to you, hey, Tara, how are you doing? And you say, oh, I'm fine. Should they simply just take it that way? Or should they call you out and say, well, how are you really doing? Beyond being just fine. Would that be at all helpful to you?
Are you asking for a specific reason? Did you want to ask me that?
No, I'm thinking actually for myself. I think when people ask me, it's almost like the salutation. You say, "Hi, how are you?" And then the next thing automatically almost is, "How you doing?" But do we
Maybe.
really pause to say, "How are we doing?" Have we even checked with ourselves? Well, how am I actually doing? How am I really feeling? Because it is quick and easy to just say, "I'm fine," but
Mhm.
am I then really sharing openly enough with how I'm actually doing?
Yeah, and that's why as part of the relationship check-ins, the first step, the review part, is some self-reflection about how you really are doing in the relationship. But it's always good to reflect on generally how we're doing. But what I would say is maybe we need to ask a different question. Instead of saying, how are you doing? Be more specific, like, or how are you doing with relation to being back from your awesome trip to Turkey? Or something like that. You know what I mean? Like being more specific in our questions to our partners so that they can give a better answer. Because sometimes when someone says, like, how you doing? You just go, fine, because you're not wanting to give them the life story. But if they asked you like a specific question, like, how are things going with the podcast? Like, what's your latest topic? Or those sorts of things, kind of like the art of conversation. You ask more specific questions, you get a more specific answer. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great point. Sure.
So we'll try to not ask how we're doing.
Try and make it a little bit more personal, a little bit more involved.
Yeah, maybe. We'll try it out.
Let's give it a shot.
And then the last one is, which, and we'll go into more detail in a moment, is having outside support outside of your relationship.
Mm.
So I said supportive friends, but choosing wisely. And I think we talk about a bit about that a little bit later on. A community of people you can talk to and professionals.
Yeah, it's good to have a supportive network. Absolutely. Let's not put all of our eggs in one basket, so to speak, right? We don't want to burden our partners either with them always being the go-to person that we turn to.
Yeah, and I think that's people's default, right? And then when things happen and the partner is the person they always talk to, it's like, now who do I talk to? You know what I mean? So yeah, it's good to create your network of support, professionals, friends, and community in order to get the help you need. So,
Yeah.
so
Think poly.
think poly, exactly. Polyamory in your support network.
Yes.
So questions like, oh, well, how do I know when to seek support? What are the signs? And I like to say that the simple answer is anytime or every time. It's never a bad thing to get support.
Without a doubt, every time for sure. But that's not to say that we will always have to go to the other for help or assistance and become dependent upon them. In fact, just the opposite. In time, in therapy, we will gain greater inner strength and we'll find ways of coping and using coping mechanisms to help become stronger and more independent.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason we might go to a coach or therapist or both or take courses is to build up our skills and our, ability to, be um, self-sufficient in terms of dealing with issues as they come up. So here are some signs it's time to reach out for help. Again, these may be obvious, but it's nice to point them out. So here we go. Persistent anxiety. So if you have this sort of low level or even high level of ongoing anxiety, that might be a sign that you need to reach out for support. Some people feel this in their body. I know when I'm feeling high levels of anxiety, I feel it in my chest. So often people will recognize this feeling of anxiety in their body first.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, in some cases, it might even go beyond just that low level of persistent anxiety or even spiked anxiety into panic attacks and
Mhm.
beyond. So yes, it's important that we do recognize this and that we look for help.
Yeah. If you're feeling any kind of resentment, so of the situation, of your partner, of things that are going on in your life, whether it's related to a relationship or otherwise, that's a good sign that you need to seek out some help.
Yeah, without a doubt, if it's affecting the quality of your relationships or the quality of your well-being in life overall, then it is something that needs to be addressed.
Another thing that people commonly share with us, and the reason they do reach out, is they feel, and this can be tied to anxiety or otherwise, you feel emotionally flooded. Like you can have one way or the other. You feel like emotionally flooded or shut down during relationship conversations. And those conversations often end in arguments. So you may be flooded with emotions, have an argument, and storm off, or just detach completely those are some signs as well, and things that happen.
Yeah, another one is the looping in jealousy, shame, or comparison, right? And we become almost obsessive in our thoughts, and it just seems to dominate the horizon. So that's also something that would be potentially a telltale sign that there is attention needed there.
Yeah, and when you get into those situations, often what happens is that the relationships themselves feel like a more of a source of stress than of support. You get that overall feeling that something just isn't right. It's not what you expected, and it's definitely not fun. I know that's a common thing that people share, is they thought this was going to be like this amazing journey and adventure and fun and exciting, and then they end up like, why did I do this? Overwhelmed and emotional. It's brought up things that I wasn't expecting.
Another big one for me is if we find ourselves having trouble managing our daily life or meeting our own needs, right? So what's going on there? It's not as it should be, and there's something at play that needs to be examined.
Yeah. Exactly. And that can be relationships or life in general. You want to grow. People get in a situation where they're like, I want to do this, I want to grow, but you keep meeting the same troubles or emotional walls or emotional flooding, and it feels like unsettling, and you just can't get out of it. Sometimes we get in our own heads, believe ourselves that we're not able to do this, or this isn't for me, or that sort of thing. And then that's when it would be helpful to get some support. Sometimes people have a feeling that they're only doing things because they don't have a choice. Like a partner has decided that they want to be non-monogamous, and now you're in the situation where you're not sure what to do, and you're afraid that if you do not follow through, then that would be the end of the relationship. And so that's when I'd say both people need to engage in some sort of support together. Because unfortunately, what I've seen, and I've worked with people like this, is that the one partner who is the one who's wanting non-monogamy is saying, well, you have to deal with your shit, once you're ready, I'll be here, and not wanting to participate in it. And that puts someone in a very difficult situation where they feel they have no choice other than to figure it out. It can be very isolating and alone. And the exact opposite of what, it's meant to do, right?
Right, exactly. No, that's an unfortunate position to feel. But again, you're absolutely right. By talking about these things and working with somebody else, we might come to realize that actually we do have a choice. We always have a choice. There's always something that we can do about it. Another one for me, a telltale sign when I might want to start looking at these things, is if I feel that there's been a certain level of lack of participation or interest in things that I might have previously had interest in. So is there a dip there? What is going on? What is causing that?
And is that like feelings of depression too, or not necessarily?
No, absolutely. Often it is an indication of depression, or it could be situational, but either way, let's find out what is at play, what might be the cause of this, and what might be the remedy to it.
Another one that you noted down, when your anger levels don't reasonably or objectively match the scenarios that you're in. So rather than withdrawal, you activate anger.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting how the anger might present itself outside of these bursts that we might all be able to easily identify. But does my anger then take a different course where I'm acting out in other ways? Am I doing things that are inappropriate in many ways, right? So, it could be even just going towards other people for relief so as not to have to deal with my feelings of anger. It's unfortunate, but again, we're not often taught how to be angry or entitled to feel our feelings of anger. As little kids, very often, we will be punished if we feel angry. We'll be told to go to our room and have a timeout or go in the corner and be quiet, but not being able to own these feelings and express them in a healthy way. So we want to find ways to be able to acknowledge them and then be able to articulate them without having to demonstrate them.
And then in demonstration, you're thinking sometimes people take retaliatory behavior.
Without a doubt, unfortunately, yes, I think it could find, again, that would be another example of it being an unhealthy outlet.
And then a couple more that we have on this list. So a noticeable dip in self self-care routines. So not taking care of yourself as you normally would because maybe you're distracted or having emotional load that's too difficult to handle. Displays or thoughts of self-harm. And if those are coming up, then those are definitely times where you need to reach out for support and share with that person, like the professional that you've reached out to, that you were having those feelings, because those are very serious. And then, if you already have a pre-existing mental health issue and are having any sort of feelings of difficulty in navigating non-monogamy, definitely should seek out some support. And then the other one, which maybe is not as related to your emotions, if you just want to feel like you're thriving, like you want to be feeling better and not just surviving, like you want to do better, you want it to be an awesome experience. That's also another great way to reach out. So to up level and to grow.
Well said. Again, this is an attempt to kind of normalize and destigmatize mental illness, and reaching out for help and asking for help is powerful and not shameful. It's a sign of strength, not weakness, right? We would go to a doctor to fix a broken arm. Why wouldn't we go, as you say, to someone for a broken heart? So it's easy to try, or it's perhaps easier in the moment to try and minimize or dismiss these feelings, but it is a sign of strength and courage to say, you know what, it's not the way it should be. I want it to be better. I'm going to reach out. I'm going to get help.
Yeah, and I think it's important also to say that you don't have to stop your life or stop everything in order to fix yourself. You can have relationships, you can explore. You just make sure you're getting support and good support while you're doing that. And you know when you have to take a pause or a break or something like that. But it doesn't mean you shut off everything else in your life and get support. Would you agree?
Without a doubt. And, I mentioned good support. Speaking to friends and loved ones can also be great help. There's no doubt to that. We always feel better when we speak to our mother, but it may not be a substitute to speaking to a professional, as the friends and family may be well-intended, but they may not be fully equipped or skilled in offering the help that's necessary. Right. And even though they may have good intentions, they may also have their own interests in wanting to make things a certain way or wanting to provide certain comfort. And it might make it difficult for them to remain neutral or objective, even if these difficult things need to be often said.
Yeah. And in fact, I've heard this from my own coaches. Being a coach and you being a therapist, it's best really not to take on those roles with family members and friends, right? You aren't 100% neutral. You do have a stake in it, so to speak. And so it's always great. You can be a loving and supportive friend, family member, etc., but you cannot replace them getting independent support that they need. So as much as we want to help.
But also, Tara, on the other side of that is, if you are trying to avail yourself to your friends and families, you might become kind of overwhelmed or burdened by that, because do you ever get to not be in that role? They might slot you into that. And then every time you see them, they're simply utilizing that. And it can be rather taxing as the recipient of that.
Yeah, I say that, but then I had a conversation with my sister the other day, and I really wanted to talk to her more about it and support her. But, she opened up the door and she said some things and we had a good chat. So I think that's fine. And I think that's good.
Yeah, of course. And you will always extend yourself. You are that loving person. But again, it kind of goes back to that idea of boundaries at the same time, where we need to maintain certain professional boundaries when we are in therapy. And the other person is served by those as well.
Awesome. Okay. So if you're at the point where you feel you need support or something you want to investigate, there's a couple different options that you can do. And we want to just quickly share the difference between them. So of the big things. So we talked about coaching. I'm a coach. And generally with coaching, I'd say the focus is on growth, personal growth, achieving goals, building skills, and creating a desired outcome or future. Very action oriented. Not that therapy and other things aren't, but that is specifically the role of the coach. And I see it as a collaborative approach. At least that's what I talk to my clients about. It kind of focuses on where you are now and where you want to go. Some coaches do work a bit more therapeutically. I'd say that I do that a little bit because I have an amazing supervisor, Andre, that's taught me a lot, but it's not a medical situation. I don't diagnose or treat mental illness. I don't have the skills for that. I don't have the background on therapeutic modalities, and most coaches, I'd say, do not, unless they are coaching but also have a therapeutic background. And so some of the things that a coach can work with you are building confidence, improving communication, setting boundaries, navigating polyamory, navigating life transitions. So that's coaching.
Well said. And of therapy, what would you say?
Well, I think in therapy, the focus is more around healing emotional pain, resolving trauma, and managing mental health challenges that someone might have. And so, more so than coaching, therapy does delve a bit more into your past to understand how things are impacting your present and possibly your future. It's a regulated field, so psychotherapists like yourself are licensed, trained professionals and able to recognize and treat mental health conditions. Would you say that that's true?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate.
Okay, and some of the things I said, it was a regulated field, and some examples and things that therapists treat, and maybe you can help me as well here, Andre, is addressing depression, anxiety, PTSD, trauma, unresolved grief, attachment issues, relationship issues, like a lot of things.
Yeah, basically, just about every thought or feeling as a human being we might have, we'll take a look at.
Yeah, and I think the difference too, and at least the way you practice therapy, is that you also work on people and support their personal growth and achieving goals and building skills and helping with life transitions. When you look up the definitions, usually they leave those things out and say that that's just coaching. But I think similar to me with a therapeutic approach, I think some of the stuff you do is also with a coaching approach as well. So practical things too.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think there are nuances to both that there's a lot of overlap in both approaches, and
Yeah.
both can be very beneficial.
Yeah, which is why when we do stuff together, it's cool because we bring both those perspectives. So we're a coaching and therapy team. And so everything we teach and all of our courses and our resources and stuff have that kind of balance of those two things. And then there's sort of the DIY self-directed approach. So, you want to do things on your own. And I think that's awesome. And I would never discourage people from doing things like reading and listening to podcasts and taking courses. I think what's great about these sort of things, especially when you're starting in non-monogamy or you're trying to deal with some situation, is they give you a baseline understanding of what you need to know and often have practical exercises and things you can do to increase your understanding and skills. I think the difference between a course or program versus working directly with somebody, either in a group or individual environment, is that they don't necessarily satisfy the need to implement those skills. So you don't always get the direct help with implementing them and applying them to your specific situation. But I think they're awesome. When I work with people individually and with couples, I still suggest they do things like they get our Poly Newbies course because it's got the trainings and the activities and stuff. And then when we meet, we speak about certain things that are specific to their situation. So, all right. So we've been talking for a while. Shall we share how we support each other through tough times?
Sure, why not?
Yeah, I was trying
Um,
to think of some specific stories. Did you have anything you're thinking of?
Not necessarily a specific story at the moment, but overall, I like to acknowledge how you are a safe haven for me. You are a secure base that I know that I can share my thoughts and my feelings without judgment, that you are and remain curious about it. And I think you and I have really started to incorporate this idea of either being the mouth or the ear. And
Yes.
what that means is we're good at announcing what the other person or asking the other person what it is that they might be needing. So by mouth and ear, we say, well, do you simply want me to listen? And I shouldn't say simply, would you like me to be present and listening? Or would you like me to offer you a different perspective, some advice, something that might be helpful? And that has really been a wonderful gesture and something that has been beneficial for me.
Yes. Well, I'm laughing if anyone's watching the video because my tendency before we implemented this, and I appreciate you for coming up with this idea of alerting each other to what our needs are, is that I would immediately jump to solutioning. And I think this happens to a lot of people, a lot of couples. And, the other person just wants to be heard and understood and doesn't necessarily want you to solve the problem in that situation. But for some people, it can be really uncomfortable not to solve the problem or not to offer something because maybe they feel that their value is in solving the problem. And so, yeah, so, that has
But
been
that's
super helpful for us.
But that's a good point. You say about being uncomfortable. And I think that's often what prompts people to want to offer something, to be going into the solving mode, is because it brings up their own feelings of discomfort. So what can I do? It's hard sometimes to just sit with it and have these feelings. But sometimes it's exactly what is necessary. But really what it is doing for me is demonstrating the ability to be present, to be there for the other person.
Yeah. And it's a practice for sure. I think sometimes I still slip into offering advice or getting frustrated or whatever it is, right? And I think you're really good at kindly pointing out those situations. And so we can reset and get back to, what it is we need in the moment.
As you say that, Tara, it makes me think of two things. The idea of gratitude, how we are able to both appreciate what the other person does for us, but also the idea that when we are sharing this, it is directly combating the idea of isolation. And that is unfortunately a big component of mental health issues, that we feel as though we are unique in that way, that we would be embarrassed to announce it, or that nobody would understand. And that's not accurate at all, which is again why it is so important to talk about subjects like this, to help normalize and destigmatize this idea, so we are not alone. We can reach out and get help.
I'm pretty happy that over the last, I don't know, I'd say maybe 5-10 years, that mental health has come more to the forefront and people are more open to sharing their struggles and that sort of thing. I mean, sometimes it's still a source of embarrassment, but even in organizations and companies, they have like built-in mental health supports. I know when I worked for the government, for Mental Health Week, they have all kinds of activities. They have people speaking to their lived experiences. So whenever you have opportunities to listen to those stories, it's always great, because I think it helps you feel like I'm not the only one. And I used to love those and felt very honored that people who were in pretty high positions would share their own struggles. And it just reminds us that we're not alone in dealing with some of our own mental health issues. Yeah. All right. So that's a good segue to our closing for today. Thanks you all for listening. A reminder again that you're not alone. Many people struggle with adapting to non-monogamy and dealing with the emotions that come along with it. And so we encourage you to reach out for professional support if you're struggling either with this or with other aspects of your life. We'll put links in the resources on how to get in touch with us, but there's also a lot of great online resources that have listings of people like Psychology Today or polyfriendly.org if you're looking for someone local that you can see in person. In many places, most coaches and therapists will do a complimentary consultation call. And I think it's important to take advantage of that, because you want to find the right fit for you and if they're going to be the right support for you. And we do have that resource for you that we can share. We'll put it in the show notes, but if you want to drop the term mental health in the comments of the podcast, I'll make sure I send you that link. It's a great way to check in with yourself on how you're feeling and what may be causing it and plan for some next steps. And so we invite you to share this episode in your networks or with friends or anyone that you feel would need it.
Thank you again, Tara, for this wonderful podcast and all the wonderful things that we covered. However, we did not get a chance to speak about the benefits or necessity for medications and psychiatry. On that note, I want to say that if you are considering hurting yourself or someone else, or you know of someone who's going to hurt themselves or someone else, that we implore you to please reach out to crisis hotlines or the emergency room or 911. Please do it. There is help available. Be safe and be well.
Thanks for listening, and thanks for being an awesome co-host, Andre. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
If you want to have secure, satisfying, and sexy relationships, check out our Poly Newbies digital course. It's 7 modules of all you need in one place. And as a thank you to our listeners, we're offering it at an inclusive price. Link is in the show notes, plus all the other awesome things we talked about today. Thanks for listening to the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast with TNA. Don't forget to subscribe and give us some love on your favorite podcasting platform. You can check out the show notes for any of the links to the courses or information we talked about today. Thanks, and have a fantastic and sexy day.